It's not to the crowd, it's to the disciples. And there's a greater call happening. So, and those are happening in terms of who we are, what it means to be a disciple, and then who God is, or our relationship with God, and then our relationship with our neighbors. And even though, as we go through this, even though as we go through chapter 5, we see commandments that obviously deal with how we treat our neighbor. So in terms of teaching about retaliation, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. So even though it sounds like a commandment about our neighbors, it's really about who we are. It's not about our neighbor, what our neighbor did, it's about what kind of person are we, whether or not we can overcome the evil that's inflicted upon us by the goodness that's inside of us. So when we see these kind of commandments and the teaching about oaths, again, it's about who we are. So do we use God's name in any way? Do we simply swear off, and make oaths of this and that, or do we speak the truth? When we say yes, do we mean yes? When we say no, do we mean no? Or are we so fluid in what we do and say that we have to make a promise or produce an oath for every time for somebody to believe us? I'll give you an example that this is one of the things that really kind of irks me about that because of this passage. Over the years, there's a number of people who have become sponsors, baptismal sponsors, or confirmation sponsors, and they're not really good practicing Catholics. They really shouldn't take on the role. But, someone asks them to take on the role, so they take on the role. So many pastors are so frustrated by this that now, for you to be a sponsor, in most cases, the pastor requires of the other person's pastor to sign an affidavit that this person is a good practicing Catholic or a Catholic in good standing. So your word is no longer good. They won't let you do something, they won't let you be a sponsor until I say you're okay to be a sponsor. And that just drives me nuts because one is it presumes that people are lying to the priest, and I don't like the idea. It's not a matter of filling out more forms, but we should be that kind of church. We should be that kind of people that if I'm going to take on this responsibility, if I'm going to say yes to something, it's yes. And if the pastor asks me, do you practice your faith? I'm going to tell him yes or no. And again, it depends on what the person means by it. Some people think they practice their faith, and the person asking the question means, are you at church every single Sunday? And they're not. And so, again, there may be a distinction in levels of understanding. Usually, when I ask the question and somebody looks at me, I say, you get to define the answer. So you tell me, what does it mean to you? That comes from this understanding. Do we treat one another? Is our word good? Do we consider ourselves the kind of person who speaks truth? And the other, again, all the laws that are in chapter 5, as you start teaching about the law, about anger, about adultery, about divorce, all those teachings are really built not upon the relationship, not upon the neighbor, but upon who we are. What kind of person are we, before we undertake adultery, before we undertake divorce, before we undertake false oaths or our word not being good, before any of these things, before we retaliate, who are we? So we look at the kind of person we're supposed to be. And that's exactly what Jesus is calling us to time and again. He ends the chapter with I'm at chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father. For he makes his sun to rise on the bad and the good, and causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers or sisters only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? So you must be perfected, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. So again, he concludes that by calling us to a much higher standard for ourselves, one that allows us to reach out beyond ourselves, to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us, and not to simply retaliate, but not to form that group as this is the people I like, this is the people I don't like. That all makes sense? And let's get into the second chapter. And this is recognizing Godhood. So in chapter 6, it begins with teachings about almsgiving. And he says, take care not to perform righteous deeds in order that people may see them, otherwise you will have no recompense from your heavenly Father. This is the Ash Wednesday gospel. Okay? So this is the gospel we're going to hear on Ash Wednesday in a couple of more weeks. When you give alms, for example, do not blow a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets to win praise of others. Amen, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your almsgiving may be secret. And your Father who sees in secret will repay you. So, when you're doing something, you're doing it for God. So you want to make sure that you're putting these things forward, you're putting God first. And so, of course, the first thing is how your acts of mercy. And the most basic act of mercy, the most basic kindness, at least in those days, would be to help the poor. But when you help the poor, which is kind of the most basic thing we're called to do as Christians, is make sure that those who are in need are taken care of. How do you take care of it? Let others know. And Jesus, of course, the image is severe. It's meant to be severe. You can't even let your right hand or your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And so it shouldn't even occupy all of your time. It should be so natural to you that it just automatically happens. Your right hand gives the money away, and your left hand may be collecting it. But it's that kind of natural thing. It's just part and parcel of who we are. He goes on with that then, and he moves from the basic act of mercy to a basic act of relationship with God, or a basic act of worship, which is prayer. So we're not talking about Sunday worship. We're not talking about being in the synagogue. We're not talking about being at church. We're talking about prayer itself. And he says, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites who love to stand and pray in the synagogues and in the street corners, that others may see them. Okay, so again, and the person who comes in late to church, and they don't just come into church, but they make sure everybody knows they come into church. And that was the whole point of being late, because if they're early, then there wouldn't be anybody there to notice them. So why come early and sit down? Because you want to make sure that people see that I've arrived, I'm here, greet me. Or the same thing that the people who make a show of their prayer, their praise, their worship, whatever it might be. And priests are just as much as faulty as lay people are in terms of priests who like to make a show. The first thing, he talks about that, and those who go out to the synagogues, the street corners. I suppose in this day, and I don't want to malign anybody who's a good TV preacher, but in these days, televangelists would fall kind of in that category. There are those, you can tell on TV, there are those who are very showy about what they do, are very, very glad to show and share Christ with you, because they want you to know how good they are and how they've saved, their lives are turned around. And so it's really about them, and every sermon on the gospel seems to have something in their lives. And then there are those who are actually trying to bring Christ to you. And you can tell the difference. It doesn't take you long watching the TV to see who's the show person and who's the person of real faith. So I'm not trying to malign them all, but there are some who are obviously doing more of a show than they are trying to convert people or bring Christ to people. Then he goes on in a line that is often misinterpreted. Okay, okay, and the line that's often misinterpreted. But when you pray, go to your inner room, or go to your room, they've added the word inner, close the door, because in those days in Israel, houses didn't have inner rooms, They didn't have closets. There certainly wasn't like an outer room, and then, everybody slept in the living room. Most people didn't have money for more than one room or two rooms in the house. Luckily, there might be a kitchen in the corner. Otherwise, it was outside. The cooking was done outside, and sleeping was done inside. So they added that inner. But go to your room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret. And the reason they added that inner is because they want to emphasize what the meaning of the gospel is, to be by yourself or go to that place. And as I said, this is one of the most misinterpreted lines, because millions of people use this as an excuse not to go to church. I'm not supposed to pray in front of others. I can pray in my room. I can pray by myself. That's where God hears my prayers. It's the classic excuse not to go to church. And why should I go to church when there's all those hypocrites, standing up there talking about things that they know nothing about? So they use this gospel, against their very faith. They don't want to be in front of the hypocrites. They don't want to be with the others who are sinners. And so they're going to go in their inner room, just like Jesus told them to. So when you pray, go to your inner room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will repay you. Of course, Jesus isn't talking about a particular place, because if he's saying, if it really is the inner room, really that's, you're praying in yourself. You're praying inside. So you're not praying out here for everybody to see and share the show, but you're praying privately, inwardly. And of course, I'm sure you all have examples of this. One of my great examples of this is my father, who didn't talk much about praying, but every Sunday he was in church. Every Sunday before Mass, he kneeled down, he prayed, and never told us what he prayed about. He could have been praying that we'd shut up, or whatever it might be, or it could have been a very holy prayer, or whatever it might be. I don't know, but he would stop and he would pray, and he kept those prayers to himself. So that kind of that's the inner room. But that inner room was inspirational, at least to me, if not to the rest of my family. It was very inspirational to see someone who had such a direct relationship with God, and it was shown, but he wasn't showing it. It was known, but he wasn't talking. And that's the kind of thing that Christ is talking about here, that relationship. So it's not that you shouldn't be in the synagogue. Jesus went in the synagogue himself. But when you're in the synagogue, don't make a big deal about being in the synagogue. Or if you're by yourself. And that's what he's trying to get at, and that's why they added that inner room in the sense of trying to get people to understand, is that inward prayer. It's our attitude to God that creates prayer, not the place we're in, not the words we say. Given that, he moves forward now with words to say. Okay? And then this comes into the Lord's Prayer. And if you notice, when you read Matthew's version of the Lord's Prayer, this is the one that we use in Mass, or the one that we use. So Luke's version is very close to this, but not exactly the same. But Matthew's is the version that Christians have adopted as the basic words of the Lord's Prayer. So then he tells them, this is how you are to pray. Now in Luke's Gospel, the disciples asked Jesus, teach us to pray. John taught his disciples to pray, you should teach us. This is all part of the sermon. It's part and parcel of who God is. So if we're going to recognize who God is, it's having the right sense of how we treat others in terms of mercy, our works of mercy, how we show ourselves or present ourselves in times of prayer, and then what do we pray. And he goes forward with this, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And do not subject us to the final test, but deliver us from the evil one. And you notice we've changed some of those words over the translation. They're slightly different than what we say. Do not let us fall into temptation, but deliver us from evil. This was specifically the evil one. Some of the changes, Pope Benedict, in his book on Jesus of Nazareth, has a wonderful reflection on the Our Father. And so if you have a chance, get the book. It's a great book. And go through the reflection on the Our Father in particular. There's a couple places he has really wonderful reflections on the Our Father. But and I talked about this in one of the classes on the Mass. In the Our Father, Pope Benedict mentions out, most scholars would say there are 7 petitions in here. Okay, so, or 7 prayers if you want. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven, it's part of thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and do not let us fall into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So he counts up the 7. Normally, as I set them up, I would set them up as the ones that are if you want to call them petitions, but the ones that are referring specifically to God in heaven, and then the ones that are our needs here on earth. So, as you look at the Our Father, the first part of the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as in heaven. That all refers to God and His majesty. Okay, so whether you see it as a petition or whether you see it as an acclamation, it all refers to God and His majesty. Then we get to ourselves, because of course we always get to ourselves. And when we get to ourselves, it's give us this day, and so the prayer is always give us today our daily bread. And Jesus is going to emphasize that later in the Sermon on the Mount, which is about not worrying about tomorrow. So first and foremost, give us today our daily bread. And our daily bread is the share we need. And of course, this all refers back to the manna in the desert, doesn't it? So remember that the Israelites collected the manna, and they had to collect the manna, that's M-A-N-N-A, sorry. They had to collect the manna every day. And they would go out, and only on Friday were they allowed to collect 2 days' worth, because they're not allowed to work on the Sabbath. If they collected more than 1 day's worth, it would go bad. Except on Fridays, it would stay good through the Sabbath. So, it refers back to that manna, that sense of, again, the Israelites in the desert are in essence the most pure form of cultic worship, because they're following God most faithfully. Even though they're not always faithful to God, they're following Him most faithfully, they're following Him most carefully, because they depend entirely upon God for their sustenance, for their life. They could not get through the desert without God being here every day, without the column of fire to protect them at night, without the smoke to guide them during the day. Remember when the Egyptians came, the column moved from the front of the Israelites to the back, so that you keep a distance between the Egyptian army and the Israelites. So God was their absolute protector. God was their guide. God led them through the desert. And God fed them. He gave them manna every day. He gave them quail at night. So they had meat in the evening. They had bread in the morning. They were fed every day. So then he refers back to that, because that is where, in a sense, we need to recognize our relationship with God. Is we are completely dependent upon God. Not because we can't do anything on ourselves, but because He's the surest guide through the desert of life. So, when things get rough, you got to go back to God. But if you stick with God all the time, then you don't have to go back to God. He's always there. He's always leading you, guiding you, or He stands behind you to protect you. So if you don't see Him in front, it's probably because He's protecting you from behind you. But either way, God is present. That's part and parcel of what he calls forth in that first for that first petition that we have. Give us our daily bread. The second petition for us is forgive us our trespasses, or forgive us our sins. Debts is one of the ways of saying it. So forgive us our sins, forgive us our trespasses, forgive us our debts. Because of course more so to the Israelites in that time frame than today. But even today, there are people who are enslaved by debt. And once you go down that kind of slippery slope, things can fall very quickly. And they're talking about the legislature trying to do something about the payday loans and the title loans and things like that, because the interest on that is like 300, 400, 1,200% at times, and usually if you take out one, 2 weeks later when it's due, you're going to need another one to help pay off what was left on that, and now you still don't have any money to get through. So it can fall very quickly on those kinds of things. In the days of Jesus, of course, when you fell too far into debt, you became a slave. And so you would be sold. You would very likely be sold into slavery in payment of the debt. So that it was more severe at that time than we might recognize. But anybody who's had to suffer significant debt in their lives would also know that feeling of being overwhelmed and drowning in that debt, or people even worry about it would have that sense. And so, of course, this is the second petition. Is to get rid of the debt. But the greater debt for a Christian, the greater debt is not money, but it is sin. And so when the Christian community started embracing this prayer, they didn't say simply forgive us our debts. They changed the word because they didn't want people to think we're only worried about money and not being debtors or slaves because of our financial debts. Forgive us our trespasses, because there are debts we owe to one another. And again, we may not understand this here in the United States, but it's still very powerful in India, in Pakistan, in the Middle East, and especially in places that are controlled by Sharia law, the Islamic law, that when a trespass or when an offense is committed, the offended person has the right to retaliate. And so what happens is you have a series of retaliations, because if they retaliate more than they're allowed to, well then of course you can retaliate against them. And then there's never a forgiveness, there's only a seeking justice, so that everybody's been equally offended, or everybody's equally hurt, or everybody's equally lame. So there's no sense of forgiveness, but rather only that sense of striving towards some kind of justice to pay for the wrong that has been done. And of course, trespasses then, one of the things you ask, why is there no peace in the Middle East? Because whoever wants peace, the other side is saying, wait a minute, you can't have that yet because you did this to us, and we have to get back at you first. Then we can have peace. So whether it's the Israelites who are saying, no, the Palestinians did this, and now we have to get back at them before we can say things are equal, or the Palestinians say, no, the Israelites did this, and we have to get back at them before we can be equal. There's that constant sense of we've been trespassed against, and therefore we have to, retaliate before there's justice. So in the Our Father itself and in the Christian community, I hope, we've kind of gone beyond that. We're called to be beyond that, so that when we ask God to forgive trespasses, those things that we do wrong, with the understanding that we are also forgiving trespasses. And when we get to the end of the prayer here, that becomes the central focus of the prayer. Not the daily bread, not the Father in heaven, but that sense of forgiveness. So the final thing is, and do not subject us to the final test. Let us fall not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And again, in the prayer itself, in the original prayer in the gospel, it's not evil, it's the evil one, it's Satan, who is the personification of evil. And, in the Christian community, or in our sensibilities today, we've taken it out of simply Satan's hand and just put it in terms of all evil. And again, the Holy Father is a wonderful reflection on that, because as we go through the Mass and we explain that, we're talking about every kind of evil that we're asking the Lord to save us from. So the next part of the prayer, as the priest says, talks about every kind of evil and every kind of worry. So deliver us from all our anxieties, that keep us safe from every evil. So it expands it even further. One of the problems, of course, is when you take it out of the person, or if you personalize it too much, you have the problem of not seeing the other kinds of people around you. But if you take it out too much from the person, you have the problem of not recognizing that there are forces working against your faith, there are forces working against God. So the gospel itself puts it in the person of Satan and the evil one. The Christian community moved it out, but not to ignore Satan, but rather to also extend it and recognize that there is other evil out there. Not Satan is not doing all the evil, but evil can come from us as well. As the prayer concludes, if you forgive others their transgressions, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your transgressions. So as I said, what Jesus does is then in Matthew's Gospel, he takes that prayer of the Our Father and makes the central focus the forgiveness. And our forgiveness is dependent upon forgiving others. Without the ability to forgive others, without the willingness to forgive others, we cannot expect to be forgiven. Then the third one, and in the Gospel of Ash Wednesday, they pull out the Lord's Prayer and go to the prayer and the teaching about fasting. So again, there's three sets here: almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. And the Our Father is put in the middle there, which are the words of prayer. But Jesus goes on, when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites. They neglect their appearance, and they appear to others to be fasting. Amen, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, so that you may not appear to be fasting, except your Father who is hidden, and your Father who sees what is hidden will repay you. So, in the teaching, in terms of our relationship with God, if you pull out the Our Father for a second, or see the Our Father is kind of auxiliary to the main points of the teaching. You have almsgiving, prayer, fasting. So these three are the hallmarks of our relationship with God. Yes?
What's almsgiving?
Almsgiving is giving to the poor. Giving to those in need. So, limosna, Spanish. So, which is a basic principle since the earliest Christian days, but even before that. If you were to go on a pilgrimage or if you were to go on a journey, one of the things you have to have before you set out on your travels is something for the poor. That you bring something in order to give it away to the poor. If people are going back home, so people who either are going back to Mexico, back to Puerto Rico, back to Poland, or somewhere in Europe, one of the things they usually do is they bring a gift for their host, right? So you're going to go be with your relatives or whatever. You're going to bring a gift for them. So you want to make sure you have a gift for your relatives. But that's only part of it because, of course, you do that because they're your relatives or they're your host. But you have to have something else that you have available for the poor. That's part and parcel of any journey, particularly of pilgrimages. That's one of the things that makes a pilgrimage is that you're giving to the poor. So you can't go on a pilgrimage and then ignore all the poor people. That's why many of the large cities, whether in Europe, in South America, Central America, you'll see at the doors of the cathedral beggars, because they know people coming into the cathedral to make a pilgrimage are going to have something for the poor. They have to. It's part and parcel of being on a pilgrimage. So he builds these three things up as the hallmarks of a Christian relationship. And of course, he gives us the words of prayer. All of these are built on two things, right? They're all built on that sense of you do it because this is the thing that you do. You don't do it for others. The others don't see you. This is who you are. This is your relationship with God. So you do it because you're worshiping God. You have this relationship with God. And you do these three things. And the second part of that is, of course, is that whatever you do for the glory of God, God will see. And God rewards. But if you get your reward from others, or you do it so others might reward you, then your reward is already given to you. And the question really becomes, is your reward, is the reward I can get from you as good as the reward I can get from God? And if it's not, then I really shouldn't be looking for a reward from you. I need to be looking for a reward from God, because that's where the bread is buttered. So over here it's just dry toast. And up there, bread is buttered. So, make sense? Okay. Moving on. So he continues then, after you've got the hallmarks, then he sums them all up by looking at the treasure. And of course that's building up a treasure in heaven. So there's a reward to doing this. There's a reason for doing that, and that is the treasure. But that treasure should be in heaven. That thieves cannot steal from you, moths cannot destroy, But he also says where your heart is, where your treasure is. Where your treasure is, there also your heart will be. So if you treasure the things of this world, then your heart's going to be in this world. If you treasure the things of heaven, then your heart's going to be in heaven. And that of course is always the struggle for anybody is to live in this world but not love this world so much that we fail to recognize God in our lives. And he goes on talking about the lamp of the body is the eye. When the eye is sound, the whole body will be filled with light. But if the eye is bad, the whole body will be darkness. And of course, that's to emphasize, the image is to emphasize, what are you seeing? What is your treasure? So if you're only seeing the things that that are in this world, then the eye is unsound. It's filled with darkness. Because the eye is supposed to be seeing, the inner eye should be seeing God. And he emphasizes it one more time by basically hitting the point, whether the world's basic drive is money. Despite what Freud says about sex, the world's basic drive is money. And so you have a choice. It's either, in a sense, it's either God or money. And it's not God without money, and it's not money without God, but which one's going to be first? Which one are you going to serve, and which one are you going to use to serve? So there are people who serve money and use their faith to get money. And there are people who serve God and use their money to serve the Lord. And then he goes on again about our dependence upon God. And he uses those beautiful images that we love so much, look at the birds of the sky, they do not sow or reap, they have nothing in the barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more important than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single moment to your lifespan? Why are you anxious about clothes? Learn from the way that wild flowers grow. They do not weave or spin, but I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was clothed arrayed like one of them. If God so clothes the grass of the field, which grows up today and is thrown into the oven tomorrow, will he not much more provide for you, O you of little faith? Because, of course, he's speaking to a group of people who are constantly worried about what are we going to do next, what's happening next, what have we got to worry about, where's the money coming from, where's this happening, how are we going to get this bill paid? So do not worry and say, what are we to eat, or what are we to drink, or what are we to wear? All these things the pagans seek. Your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. So God's not unaware. He knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given besides. Now, not wanting to sound like Reverend Ike, who of course said, give me money and God will give you more. So he kind of perverted this. What he's talking about is this dependence on God, that if you truly put God first, you're not going to have to worry about these things. They come. You have a question, you have a concern, you have a doubt. Which is
I think that you need money to live, right? And like when you are so fat, money pays out of the life. You're not like the birds. We control ourselves.
Yeah. The point is,
Yeah, you should understand.
it's a very hard teaching. But it's a very hard teaching because, one, is it calls for entire trust in God. Okay? And anyone who wants to look at the world and look at the way things are is going to question it. I have a priest friend of mine, Tom Dorr, who's my pastor back when I was at Lady Ransom, before I became a pastor. And when we were there, along with the other priests who was there, Tom Bishop, we decided to start practicing stewardship there. And of course, it was a tough decision for us to do that. Many years later, Tom and I went to lunch, and we were walking back from lunch over here at St. Al's, and we were talking about our experience of trying to get people to understand stewardship. And ultimately, what we realized is that there's a moment when you have to walk off the cliff. Pardon the pun, but you have to walk off the cliff. And if you don't walk off the cliff, you will never feel God supporting you. That to know what God can do for you is to trust in God. But until you trust in God, you do not know what He can do for you. Now again, I'm not talking about being foolish. I'm not talking about, giving away your job and saying, okay, God, now feed me. So I'm not talking about ridiculousness, but I'm talking about your basic attitude. And I have my worries, I have my financial worries, and my issues, and on a regular basis, almost weekly, I come to God because I give my collection money, and it's like, God, this is looking really tight, the checkbook's going to be down way low, but I give the money anyway because I trust in God, and it's little in comparison to what God blesses me with, and I never fail. Okay, I never fall into debt. Things happen. You got to fix the car, something else. Shoes get holes in them. You got to buy new shoes, whatever it might be. I never fall into debt. Now that can happen any number of ways that I don't fall into the debt, but my point of view is it always happens because I trust in God. Now, there's a lot of ways I could make more money, like I could be charging people for this class, or I could be teaching in another parish where they pay me to come, as opposed to, me just coming running over here after dinner and doing this for free. So I could go out and make more money, or I could go out and give talks. And there was a point in my, in my life that I was running around from parish to parish doing talks and things like that. But I decided not to do that. Trusting in God, for what I need and what I need to take care of. So either the bill doesn't come or the money is there, but it works. I can only tell you that it always works. And it always works. It always
You
works.
trust in God.
Right. Again, I'm not talking about being foolish. I'm not talking about saying, okay, I'm going to throw away my Social Security check.
I'm talking about that.
Right. But it always works. God always provides. God will not be outdone and generous. But you will not know that until you trust Him. Not test Him. Trust Him. And there's a difference. So there's a difference between saying, okay, I'm going to give this amount, and if I don't get this much back, then God's really not taking care of it. That's a test, and that's false, and there's no faith. Okay? So there's a difference as opposed to saying, God, I need your help. You'll see me through this. Show me the way. Now, you have to also be able to, if you ask God to show you the way, you have to keep your eyes open the way it's going to be shown. Because there's the joke about the guy who's the rains are coming. They're talking about this huge flood, and the patrol car comes by and says, "Come on, we got to get out of here. The rain's going to be coming, and the whole place is going to be flooded." And the guy says, "No, God's going to take care of it." So rains are coming, the roads are closed, it's flooding. The guy's now on the second floor of his house. Okay. The sheriff comes by with a boat. Get into the boat. It's only going to get worse. You're going to drown. This is terrible. It's going to get worse. No, God's going to take care of me. Climbs up on the roof, the flood waters are rising, climbs up on the roof. They come with a helicopter, drop the ladder down, call out to him, climb up the ladder into the helicopter, we'll get you safe to higher ground. Says, no, God's going to protect me. God's taking care of me. Flood comes, guy dies, goes up to heaven and says, God, I thought you were taking care of me. I sent a car, a boat, and a helicopter. What more do you want? Or there's the story of the guy who prays and prays. For 20 years he's praying, God, let me win the lottery. Let me win the lottery. There's so much good I could do. Just let me win the lottery. 20 years, he never wins the lottery. Finally, he's like, God, why don't you let me win the lottery? Buy a ticket. So if we don't do our share, then obviously God can't do what we don't allow him to do. And that's part and parcel of this sense of trust, the sense of stewardship, the sense of dependence upon God. Put God first, and to be able to see the birds of the sky or the flowers of the field in their beauty means we see that God's hand does ultimately more than we can do. So I'm not trying to look like a flower, in terms of my clothes or anything like, oh yeah, I'm going to be dressed as well as any flower. That's not the point. The point is if God does so much with creation, which comes and goes, and most people think nothing of stepping on the grass or the flowers, or they think nothing of when a sparrow falls from the sky. If God does so much for that, how much more is he supposed to do for us? Because he loves us. He sent his son for us. He didn't send him for the sparrows or the flowers. He sent his son for us.
But that's why you have to say, he's all pure,
right.
He told us who is.
Right, but and again, that's why they call it the leap of faith, And people stand on the edge, looking at the chasm and saying, "I can't do that." But you will never fly with the angels if you don't get off the ground. If you don't go in, yeah. The basic point is you will not drown. Will not drown if you step into the sea. But you will never know that you can swim until you get into the water. So, and again, there are many preachers, there's whole groups of preachers who talk about the riches of what comes to you because you trust in God, or the riches. I don't preach because the gospel doesn't talk about being rich in this world. So the gospel doesn't promise that. So I don't preach that. But there are preachers who will talk about being rich in this world because you trust in God. But the gospel talks about the riches and that you will never fail anything. So again, give us this day our daily bread. I don't need more than that. All my brothers are jealous of the travels I've had. It's like, and they have wonderful families, but of course by having a wonderful family, they can't travel for one, they have to travel for 4 or 6 or something like that, so it becomes very expensive to do anything. So they all look at me, and I look at them and say, you had your chance to be a priest, you didn't want to be then don't complain. Don't complain about what a priest does. If you've given gratitude, now there are biblical norms. The biblical norm is 10%, which of course is the tithe of Abraham to Melchizedek. He gave 10% of everything that he gained in the battle to Melchizedek. So that's where it comes from, and it's encapsulated in the law of Moses to give a tenth of your offering, to give the first produce of the field, not the 10%, but the first produce of the field. So the first harvest goes to the Lord, the firstborn child goes to the Lord. So the firstborn male, whether it's a human or an ox or, the firstborn male has to go to the Lord. You can redeem your firstborn son. But otherwise, the ox or the ass or the goat or the sheep must be offered to the Lord in the temple. So the firstborn, the first gift or the first fruits always goes to the Lord. That's one biblical interpretation of it. It's encapsulated in the law. The second is the tithing or 10%. That's also encapsulated in the law and in Genesis. But when Jesus talks about it, he talks about neither the first fruit or firstborn nor the 10%. He talks about gratitude. So, and when he talks about gratitude, and again, this is Jesus always goes to the extreme, doesn't he? He always remember when Jesus teaches, he calls us to perfection. So Jesus never teaches to call us to mediocrity. He doesn't want us to be mediocre. He always teaches. When he teaches us, he calls us to perfection. When he meets us, he works with our imperfection. So he never condemns the imperfect. He never condemns the sinner. He doesn't condemn the woman caught in adultery. He doesn't condemn the person who had the hemorrhage and touched his cloak and kind of stole his healing from him. He never condemns the sinner, but he always teaches to perfection. So he doesn't teach us that it's okay to be down here. When he teaches, he says, no, you have to strive to be up here. And then when he meets us and says, oh, well, you didn't quite make that, what do we want to do about that? And you say, well, have pity on me, Lord. Be merciful to me, God. And then Jesus is always merciful. So it's always that, Lord, have mercy on us, or Lord, forgive us our sins. That, or Lord, I want to see you. So whatever it might be, the Lord always meets us where we are, but he always calls us to be much more. So he always talks about giving everything, but he always also talks about giving gratitude. And that was one of the other things, that the conversation that we were relating when I was relating a couple of moments ago with Tom Dorr. So we were talking about, how tough it was when we talked about practicing stewardship. And the three of us, we were thinking of the 10%, and all three of us were like, 10% is, and I don't want to do that. So we agreed that we would do 5, and we would try to do more. We said, okay, we'll do 5. It's kind of like a gentleman's bet type of thing. Okay, you can do it, I can do it. So we agreed to do 5%, but knowing that we couldn't get, knowing that not one of us felt comfortable giving 10%. So Tom and I are talking. This is many years later, and as we're talking, the two of us had, separated in terms of being in different parishes and all that, and it kind of gone our way, but still both of us continue to practice stewardship. So when finally I get to the point and say, I was doing my taxes, and last year I gave 25% of my income to charity. And he said, so did I. So like 15 years later, we both had come to this point that we were way beyond the 10% or anything else, but we were both looking at it not because we were looking at a percentage, because I wasn't looking at percentages. So I realized, like, I gotta give less, But we weren't looking at percentages. We were simply giving as we saw a need. We gave it. It's like, oh yeah, I can help out here. I can do that, and because we're all constantly grateful. And giving that 25% away, I didn't miss it. It's not like I didn't go on vacation that year. I probably went on, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I probably went on a nice vacation. I go on a nice vacation, so, but I've never lacked those things. So, and I don't have, there's no money in my family, so it's not like I live off family money. My dad was a builder. So, yes, he was in Oklahoma. Right. And he was trying to get those people to practice. Probably more successful than I was here. Anyway, let's move on because we're running out of time. Let's continue Well, you know what? The more you have, the less likely you're going to give. And even if even if you give a lot more, so, there are people who write $10,000 checks to their church or whatever, but they're not making $100,000, they're making $1 million. So that 10%, that $10,000 check, which looks really large, is really only 1% of their income, which is probably less than most of the other people are writing. Most people are giving about 1.5% of their income. So they're writing one big check, or like, oh yeah, see what I did? And of course, you notice a $10,000 check, but the truth is, they got a whole lot of money behind it. And there are some people with a lot. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things that overall, if Catholics would only double what they give now, which is they only give about 1 to 1.5%. So if they gave 2.5% of their income, the church would have so much money we wouldn't even know what to do. We wouldn't even be able to give all the food away or run the food pantries or anything. That we think of all the things we do now with 1.5% of the income we've got to do. And we do a lot as a church. The Catholic Church does a lot. And if we reach that 2.5% that most Protestant churches do, or the dare to say 5% that the Mormons give, something like that, but you'd be an entirely different Catholic church. Anyway, so
Question.
yeah.
But how come the bad
Because they don't get that money. We can't even pay all our bills. And if we're not paying all of our bills, so anything else is not paying all their bills. Look at the other 300 parishes in Chicago. That, many of them aren't paying their bills. There's not, there's money that comes into the Vatican, but again, the Pope gives away most of that money. And the money that sits in most of the wealth of the church is in things like buildings or art. So yes, it's worth a lot of money. It's priceless, but that's because you can't sell it. So what have you got? You sell off the art, and and what was the point of the art? The art part of the art was to praise God. So you can sell off all your praise to God to do what? It's not going to help anyone. I mean, it might help in some situations, but it's really not going to help all that much. Because the money isn't in the art. We didn't pay for most of the art. Most of the art was, again, gifts given to us. The money is in the businesses, the pockets of people, and things like that need to be donated. So it's one thing to donate, people make wonderful donations, but those donations are useless in terms of being able to help others. They're good for worship, but they're not good for ministry. And that happens, everywhere. That's one of the reasons why, for the most part, I've done very, very few times, the 125th anniversary, I asked some people to donate things for the church will use, like the communion cups that we have, or the chasubles that we use for the 125th anniversary, those kinds of things. But, through most of the rest of my time here, I'm not asked for any kind of donations for the church will use. We used all the donations for ministry. Because we had enough stuff, and we just keep using the same stuff over and over. Anyway, moving forward. So, chapter 7 then is now getting to others. So now let's try and get down to others. How we treat our neighbor. So then we have, first and foremost, in order to treat our neighbor correctly, is the commandment to stop judging. So there's no point in even trying to do something else if we're constantly judging. Which of course we just spent some time here judging other people. And in Matthew's Gospel, in Luke's Gospel, he uses the teaching about not judging. He uses the measure with which you measure will be used to measure you. So that's how he teaches about the judging in Luke's Gospel. In Matthew's Gospel, he uses that wonderful image about the plank and the speck. So you're going to go reach out and say to your brother or your sister, let me get that little speck out of your eye. You're not quite perfect. Let me tell you about your imperfection. This little thing that's wrong with you. When there's this huge plank in your own eye, you've got so many imperfections yourself, but you're going to help your brother, or your sister, or your daughter, or your son, whatever it might be, in order to get that little imperfection out of their eye, of course he says, get the plank out of your own eye first before you try and pull the speck out of your neighbor's eye, your brother's eye.
It's like the doctor says, you have to look when they're shouting.
So, well, that's why they know. They know the effects. But it doesn't moving forward, pearls before swine. So do not give what is holy to dogs, or throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn and tear you to pieces. Which is a great image, but most of us don't work with pigs. And we think about the pearls before swine. Yeah, either they will trample them, you get something very valuable, you get something very precious. And what he's talking about mostly is your relationship with God. You've got something very precious in your faith. But we, because we don't want to look pious in front of others, in front of our friends or family or whoever it might be, we take what is holy, that which is our faith inside of us, and we give it away to the dogs, those who are not holy, the people that we don't want to look holy in front of, we don't want to embarrass. And so we, in a sense, deny our own faith, or we ignore our own faith, or fail to practice our own faith for the sake of someone else who's not practicing theirs. And so we lower ourselves to the level of the dogs. Yeah.
I found one instance, so we have to be very careful about that. We had a prayer meeting, and there was two fellows coming, and most places would not want those fellows around. They had mental problems, goes without saying. We didn't know, one was a drunk, the other one was retarded. But they were coming every week. And the main reason, we stopped with the cookies and we had rye bread and butter. And they needed that rye bread and butter. They had to stuff their pockets. I bought plastic bags for them, take it home. And you see, they were there not really so much about what it was about. But in time, they saw that we meant what we were saying, that we offer everything to God. And they saw it when one got in trouble with the police and we were going to court for him time after time after time. He saw that the people of the prayer meeting were willing to give up their time, which is our biggest treasure.
Right. But, yeah.
And he was converted by that.
Sure.
He finally admitted, I have a drinking problem, I have all kinds of problems we didn't even get into half of it. But he said, I want what you do. I can see the peace you have. And we said, well, if you stick with God, you'll get it. So he went with not good motives for getting in the prayer meeting, so to speak. He was really only after food. And so was the other fellow.
Right.
But they were both impressed.
Yeah, that's not throwing your pearls before swine. That's not giving what is holy to God, because because they're coming to you.
Yeah.
I'm talking about when you stop practicing your faith because you're with people who don't want to practice theirs. So you deny your very self. You deny what's precious to you.
Right.
So you didn't stop the prayer meetings just because they were coming. You continued the prayer meetings and you expanded to help them. You saw their need, you expanded to help them.
Yeah.
But giving what's holy to dogs is taking your faith and throwing it away so you don't embarrass your family.
Yeah. Sometimes that is
Right.
a matter of trying to get yourself in a good position with certain people.
Right.
And that really is a shame because you're wasting your time. He will laugh at you behind your back. I've seen it with a friend of mine that, she was assisting. Oh, the poor woman, she needs help with her housework. I'll go help her. And she laughed with her
But
friends.
it's like, how many of us pray before we eat?
Yeah.
When we're home, when we go to a restaurant, we don't, and we'll make the sign of the cross at home, and we may say the prayer out loud. But when at a restaurant, we're not going to say the prayer out loud. We're not even going to make the sign of the cross because we don't want to,
Offense.
be seen. Yeah, exactly. So we, in a sense, we throw out what is holy in us because we're with the dog. So we allow the swine of the world, we allow what we think the world is going to think of us to take and trample our faith underfoot. So, answer to prayers then. and ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. How is this relationship with others? Is of course because it's not necessarily in our prayer. Okay, not we usually use this in terms of our prayer, but in truth, one of the things that's happening is it's in our relationship with others that we need to ask, not just the Lord, but we also need to open ourselves in terms of communication. Seek. We don't know what people's needs are or what they're seeking until we start working with them. So until we embrace them and welcome them. Right. And then we find out that they have great need that we can. They were sent to us because of the need they had. But again, that's being open to that will of God. That we want God to use us. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. And then somebody walks into our, into the office or into our, on our journey while we're walking the dog or something, and we just completely ignore them. That person was really trying to, we could have helped them if we had just said hi. And we didn't know that. So we have to be cognizant of who's around us. And then, of course, it kind of encapsulates the golden rule, which is do to others what you would have them do to you. So the basic treatment of others is what do you want them to do to you? So you want them to bless you, you want them to help you, you want them to be good to you. Well, those are the things that we're, and that's kind of a minimal, isn't it? It's, all this other stuff, he's called us to be maximum. When we talk about ourselves or we talk about God, he's calling us to this greater level. But with others, at the very least, if nothing else, treat them like you'd want to be treated. Which of course might be maximum. I mean, it depends on how we think of ourselves, but that's kind of like at the very least do this. And then he talks about the false prophets and the true disciples. So beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but underneath are ravenous wolves. By their fruits you will know them. And of course, part of the problem of the Christian in this world is we get caught, we get picked on, we get tagged. We're easy marks. We're easy marks because we think we're going. We always have to be forgiving of people. We always have to be generous with people. We always have to give to the poor, and so that people use that to their advantage. And so Jesus, in a sense, is turning this back and saying, wait a minute. Don't be taken in by the people who aren't, who don't. Who you really can't help, in a sense. So I overheard you telling a story of a person, you were coming out of the grocery store and the person told you how hungry they were and you said, here, take my food. And he didn't want your food, he wanted your money. Yeah. And it's the same thing. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm really hungry, it's like, okay, let's go see what's in the refrigerator. I'll be glad to, make you whatever I got. I'll give you my dinner. It doesn't matter to me. I'll give you my dinner. Oh, I don't want your dinner, I want your money. Well, then you're not really hungry, Or if they want, if they need medicine, I'll go to the store and buy them the medicine. But I'm not going to just give the money away unless I know they're going to use the money for something, like they're going to use the money for what they say. But there's all kinds of people who tell me a good story. I know one priest who we used to sit down and listen to the beggars who come in, and he'd tell them straight out, that story is not really good. You've got a couple of holes here and here. I'll give you $2 for it. It's not much of a story. And others are like, oh, that's a great story. Here's $10. It's really well done, well developed. I don't believe a word of it, but it was entertaining. Here's $10. So he warns us not to get taken in, because there's a lot of people who will try and do that. They'll use our generosity. They'll use our ability to forgive against us. And they are false prophets. They're ravenous wolves. True disciple, on the other hand, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. And this is in stark contrast to John's gospel, where all you need, or what Paul says, all you need to do is confess with your lips and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, and you will be saved. And this is in stark contrast because he says not everyone who cries out, Lord, Lord, will get into heaven. Because Paul will say it, he says it in his epistles, St. James says it, St. Luke says it, St. John says it in his gospel. The ultimate test of faith is action. Faith is not cognitive. Faith is only performed in action. Faith is not an assent of your mind to believe in the Lord. Faith is changing your life to believe in the Lord. Faith must be shown by the things that we do. So he says, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many people will say to me on the day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy? Did we not drive out demons? So all the great things, look at what we did in your name. We even used your name for good, but we never believed it. You know? But it was a good show. You know? I got great ratings on TV. I was able to collect millions of dollars. We had a great show. We had a great time. But I never really believed we would work. You have questions?
Faith without works is useless.
Exactly. Which is the way James says it. But Paul also has the exact same belief. But in different arguments in the epistles, or in John's gospel also, John has the exact same belief too. But as you're dealing with one thing or another in different discourses or different arguments, you emphasize one thing or another. So, I certainly don't want people to hold me to every single word I say in every homily, because some homilies I'm trying to emphasize one thing or another. So, I may go too far this way in order to get you to understand a point, which of course Jesus does all the time. He gives us extreme examples so that it makes us move, makes us think. But so Paul, there are places where Paul really emphasizes faith in the Lord. But if you read further on in the letter, or you read the next letter, he talks about, the action that produces that faith, or that, the works that have to come from that faith. So he never talks about faith that is void of action, or void of doing the will of God. He never talks about that, that you could be a faithful Christian while you're murdering your brother. That those two are incompatible. But my own brother, when he first converted to the Bible church, is like, being saved by Jesus is so great because no matter what you do, Jesus saves you. Jesus forgives you. And so if I kill my brother, I would be saved. Jesus saves me. Like, there's a certain, because if you believe in Jesus, you're not going to kill your brother. So there's a line. So faith must mean something. It's not just the word you say, but it must mean something. So faith then controls what you do. And that's part of being a true disciple. It's not simply following the Lord. Oh, I love these commandments. These are great. But it's following them and actually doing those things. And when we don't, and this was, this was one of the Pope's reflections a couple of weeks ago. When we don't, it's not simply saying I have a problem, because this commandment's really tough for me. It's I've sinned. I failed to do what I'm called to do. That's sin. And recognizing that, because the only way of changing us is if we realize we've sinned. If it's a problem, well, Jesus could fix that. But there's no conversion, there's no repentance, there's no movement. So when there is sin, we need to call it sin. And that allows us to be converted. It allows us to change our lives, change our ways. Any other questions? So I did not get to chapter 10. I apologize. We will get to chapter 10. We're going to do chapter 10 and 13 next time. Okay, chapter 10 and 13. We should be able to do that pretty easily to get two chapters. That's it. Thank you. I'm glad somebody got the pie really